You spread out the skies. You have opened our eyes. Your ways, oh God, they are holy.
What does the normal Christian life look like? Spoiler alert, not the losing battle we find depicted in Romans 7. Someone in that story has been ambushed, derailed, and if we can find out how that happened, it'll help us prevent similar sabotage in our own lives. Here's how Paul describes life in the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom, he says. How very different that is from the picture of bondage and dismay that we find in Romans 7. I can will what's right, but I can't do it. I end up doing the things I hate. Who will set me free? So what's gone wrong? We find the key in verses like Romans 6:14. Sin will have no dominion over you, for you're not under law but under grace. The corollary of that is, without grace in our lives, sin will have dominion over us. Grace here isn't undeserved favor or forgiveness or mercy. In Paul's letters, grace is a heavenly, life-changing power. Religion that's not steeped in grace will leave us weak and vulnerable. And it's possible for believers to start in the Spirit and then fall away from that grace. They don't lose their salvation, just their spiritual power. It's what happened to the Galatian churches. Having begun in the Spirit, are you now finishing in the flesh? Asks Paul. They were adding Jewish ritualism to their faith. You observe days, months, and seasons, he says. This ritualism would deflect them from grace, and as a result, they'd end up weak, enslaved again to the evil elemental powers of the cosmos, the stoicheia. Translators miss the point when they translate stoicheia as principles or something like that. These are spiritual beings. They're not gods, and Paul says in fact they're weak and worthless, but they are clever and they are the enemies of our souls. Do you really want to be their slaves again? Paul asks. The same was happening with the Colossians. If you died in Christ to the cosmic forces, the stoicheia, says Paul, why play into the enemy's hands by following Jewish ritualistic laws? Don't touch this, don't eat that. All that law keeping won't help you deal with the old nature, and without grace you'll end up weak, a prey again to the spiritual forces, the elemental powers of darkness that Paul says we're fighting against in Ephesians 6. And that's what had happened to Paul himself in Romans 7. He says he was tricked. He was living without the Jewish law, and then somehow law came back into play. He says when the law came, sin revived and I died. He was robbed of his spiritual power. His relationship with God suffered. It felt like he was dying inside. This was probably during his quiet early years, the ones mentioned in Galatians 1. He describes the experience using the present tense. I can will what's right and so on, but that's a storytelling device. It doesn't mean he's describing his current state at the time of writing. He remembers his fight with covetousness, epithumia, the desire to take something that's not rightfully ours. Epithumia is the word used in the account of Jesus teaching about adultery in the heart. Paul's problems are likely to have been sexual in nature. It's hard for us nowadays to appreciate the dangers back then of reverting to Jewish law. It hadn't always been that lifeless, debilitating thing. Think of the joy-filled worship of the Psalmists, for example. But it had been hijacked. It became a formal, man-centered thing which the clever powers of the cosmos saw they could use. In the hands of the Jewish proselytizers who followed Paul around, it proved to be a major weapon of warfare against Christian souls, and Paul knew that from personal experience. For us, if we find ourselves weak and failing in areas where before we had no problem, something has blocked the flow of grace in our lives. An early warning sign will be the drying up of joy and thankfulness. The remedy is to develop prayerful, loving intimacy again with God in our daily walk, where heartfelt thanksgiving is a natural way of life. It may take us time to regain lost ground, but the battle belongs to the Lord. Find a church where there is easy celebration of grace, not just weekly pressures to do more, try harder, be better. Find teaching that imparts grace to you, that leaves you feeling excited and empowered. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Without the Spirit, we'd be no match for the enemy. With heavenly grace in our lives, we will always be the winners.